How we doing, everyone? Hopefully you're doing great out there. Thank you so much for being here. And right off the bat, I also want to say thank you so much to Crocoblock for inviting me to speak at the summit here. I'm greatly appreciative, and I'm excited to talk to you guys today. So the topic that I want to kind of go over and give you my insights and my analysis and everything on is how to build fast dynamic websites, specifically the stack that I'm currently using to do so. Now, and right off the bat as well, I want to tell you guys that this is pre-recorded, so I filmed this a couple weeks ago, and from when you're seeing it now, but it is obviously premiering live. I will be in the chat. So anything that you see, think about, any questions, thoughts, comments, if you just want to say hi, drop them in there. I will be there, and we can have a chat about my stack and the whole video here and any other questions that you have. So would be more than happy to do that. So make sure you do that. A little bit about me, just to kind of give you just to kind of paint a quick picture, is I've been building websites with WordPress specifically since 2017. I make YouTube videos now. I have a agency called Find It Tech that I have learned a ton through from all sorts of client projects, and then also my specific things that I've done for other projects, like on my own, like personal projects, things like that. So I've used a ton of different tools, right? And I try to document that on my website now, marksmansky.co and /tools. If you want to go there, you can see like everything that I use. But specifically in this video, I want to show you the stack that has gotten me to this point the best results when I'm trying to build fast dynamic websites. I think it's pretty good right now. Definitely not saying it's the best. And I'm also definitely saying that this is a lot of preference. You have to, don't just watch this video. If I could put a disclaimer here, don't just watch this video and copy my stack. I would much rather you watch this video and some other videos and then start to kind of learn through it. This is just to give you a little bit of an idea as to what might work for you, but I'm not saying it definitely will be perfect for your specific situation, the types of websites you're building, all that sort of stuff. That said, what I would classify the stack as is very performant, meaning there's not a lot of bloat, the code is pretty clean, and everything kind of just like works together, so to speak. Well, there's not a lot of, there's literally not a lot of plugins, you will see. There's not a lot of stuff going on. It's tight, okay? I think that's important. That's an important thing to consider. It's very capable, so there's not a lot of limitations, so to speak, meaning that all the times I've had stacks in the past, I've had, amalgamations of tools in the past, and I've ran up against hurdles, whether they were performance-based or specifically functionality-based. I literally could not do something for some reason, right? And that was a little annoying, and then I had to go find another plugin and put that in my stack or maybe custom code it or what have you, but not ideal. If you can find yourself a tight stack that is very capable, I think that's huge. And then the last thing is efficiency, maintainability. Tough to kind of describe this, but the idea is if you are going to build more than one site, then you should really consider what that actually means and what the ramifications of having a really good stack could potentially be, like very positively. So if you have this and it's it's reusable, so to speak, and it's you can constantly be making a lot of websites quickly, depending on your goals. You just want it to be very stable in that regard, and you want it to be fast. If in the case where you need to come back to something later, everything's as standardized as possible. If you're trying to build an agency or just multiple websites in general, standardization is good. So I would say that. And then the other thing that I would say is that if you are building more than one website, which is what you'll kind of see here, if you're in an agency mode or even the freelancer mode, you should try to stick most of the time to a stack. You want to have something that's familiar. You want to have something that is, maybe that you could put together a blueprint site for, and then you can just kind of like clone it and be ready to go. We'll talk more about that, but we'll get into it. So as I go through all this and stuff like this, as I finish up this preamble that we got here, I want to go through this with the mentality of somebody that the best way I think to organize this is kind of from the ground up. So we're not going to talk just specifically about the website. We're going to give a little bit about like domain registrars, DNS, hosting, those types of things, because those are all part of your stack, even though they're not like specifically on the WordPress install. We'll get into that as well, because I do think that is something that, if you're a beginner or if you're trying to still continue to refine your stack, I know that over my period of time, not have I just changed the tools, I've also added individual like categories of tools, so to speak. DNS management, like kind of being one of them. Again, we'll get into all that. So it's just kind of an important disclaimer that I wanted to kind of put in here, as we go. Last couple things here is as we go through this, I am going to talk about my stack, but I'm going to talk about maybe a couple little anecdotes or stories or tips, because to make a really good, dynamic, fast website, we're not going to be able to cover it in 25 minutes, but to do that, you have to not just have the tools, but you have to know how to use them, and you have to know a little bit of intangible stuff that hopefully I can kind of interject here and there in this talk. So hopefully that'll help. All right. So with all that said, let's jump over into our kind of blueprint site, and I will just start showing you a bunch of things, and we'll kind of just walk through all of this together. Now, what you are seeing here is where I want to start, but it's not what we're going to talk about first. This is a blueprint website. Now, if you're not familiar with what that is, super simple definition is you go and you install an instance of WordPress, a clean WordPress installation on your hosting and everything like that. We'll talk about that. And maybe you could actually follow along here kind of if you want to do something like this, if you don't already have a blueprint site. A blueprint site is the site that you pretty much clone, per se, depending on terminology that you're using, every single time that you start a new website. If you are going to build more than one website in your life, I kind of think that you should probably have a blueprint website. If you're going to be building them at scale, you absolutely need to. It's definitely going to help you, and you're not going to be like it's going to take out so much work if you can just get your website, your blueprint website to where you need to be. We can make a whole different video on kind of like the setup and everything like that, but at a high level, just get all your plugins, your themes, any sort of like maybe code snippets or things that you use, license keys, any settings to native core WordPress. You want to make sure that's all good. You also want to make sure that these things are auto-updating, because this is a site that you're not actually going to be using. It's a site that's going to be probably sitting on your server or maybe sitting on a local environment. You want to make sure that all that is kind of like kept up to date. Not so much of a big deal if it's on a local environment, but still, this is the site that you're like, okay, this is kind of your template, so to speak, for your whole install. And like, okay, we got a new client. We're going to clone our blueprint website and we're going to go to work. So that is the concept there. We'll come back to this, but I want to give you this thought because this is what your goal, so to speak, is. This is kind of like the end of, if I said somebody, what's my stack? I could show them this blueprint website and I could explain that kind of through there. So with all that said, let's start at the beginning, like I said earlier. Where we kind of need to start for something like this, in my opinion, is way at like the top or the bottom, depending on how you look at this a stack. And I'll say the bottom. We have to start at the bottom. What is the first thing that if somebody said, hey, I want to build a website, what's the first thing that you're going to have to think about or do or whatever? In my opinion, this is probably a little subjective, but in my opinion, it's a domain name. So I'm approaching this talk from more of like an agency perspective, but if you're just building your own website, you kind of have to think about it to a certain degree. So I'll kind of cover a little bit of both things. In the agency world, you need to have domain names. And most of the time, you're going to have a client, at least in my experience, where they either have a domain name already, we're transferring it, we're buying it for them. Golden little tip number one is our agency does not own domain names for other people. So you have to think about a good way to manage that domain. You want access to it, but you don't want to own it. What we have pretty much landed on is Namecheap as the domain registrar that we use. Our clients have an account at Namecheap. We have an account at Namecheap. Our clients buy the domain name. They make sure it's renewed and everything like that. And then we have access to it. We have like shared domain access to it. It works really well. There's other platforms that you'd use for it. But Namecheap, in my opinion, is like a really good average consumer way of handling the domain names. So that is what we do for client domains. Now, for all the domains that I personally have, the agency has, and everything like that, we kind of prefer Cloudflare. And the reason is because we use DNS at Cloudflare. We'll talk about that secondly here in a second. But Cloudflare has a domain registrar. Domains are actually like even cheaper than a lot of other places, which is not a huge deal because it's not super expensive to begin with. But Cloudflare is just a mammoth of a company. They have a lot of like very generous free stuff that you could do. And then you could add on if you need to for other plans and pricing and everything like that. But just to cover the domain registration portion of this video, our agency, like client domains, we have them transfer, or we have them buy at Namecheap, and then we get the shared access to that, and they manage all that. And then for Cloudflare, that's where we put our domain names. We register them at Cloudflare. So if we go to the second thing that I would say is DNS, because okay, you have a domain name now, and now it's like, well, what do you do next? Like, is there a piece in there? And this is what I was talking about earlier. This is one of those things that I didn't have for a while. We didn't have in the agency. And adding Cloudflare really adds a ton of things. Like, I mean, again, if you look through the product offering, even just on the free plan, you kind of get like CDN, you get like SSL stuff. Like, there's a lot kind of going on here. It's a little bit of a more managed approach depending on what you're used to perhaps. But honestly, if you're serious about this, you want to make a lot of websites, you want to have like a real big impact on your clients, like website and technical architecture like that, Cloudflare is literally the GOAT as far as it comes to like DNS management and everything like that. So that is what we decided to use there. And again, most of our stuff is just, I think, on the free plan for the Cloudflare side of things. But instead of going directly, connecting the domain directly to our hosting, we have Cloudflare kind of as that proxy in the middle. Gives us some added benefits, low cost. It's really fantastic. So, and the next thing too is we have domain registrar, we have DNS. The next thing would be hosting. And this is where it gets kind of like a ton of options. Not only a ton of options, but a lot of like interesting things that, do you want managed hosting? Do you want like, self-managed? There's a whole thing there. We don't have time to go into everything. I'm just trying to give you where I've landed so far. What we currently use is GridPane for what I would say is our mediator, kind of like the control panel, so to speak, above the actual like box or the actual server. For the servers, we use Vultr. The cool thing about GridPane and Vultr, in my opinion, and GridPane also integrates with other platforms like DigitalOcean and such, AWS, and on and so forth. But the cool part about GridPane is that when you go to GridPane, you get all the technical stack and you get the everything that's in that kind of like, we'll call it GUI layer, so you can integrate, so you can interface with the cloud servers here at like Vultr, for instance. But the awesome part is that we pay Vultr for the boxes, so we control the boxes through Vultr, and GridPane kind of sits atop it. There are other companies which are good as well, but there are other companies that you don't do that through, and it's more of like you go to the company, you buy the server, and then they own the server and they control that server, and you don't really have that direct access if you need it. I'm not saying necessarily you would need it, but it's nice to have the access if and when it's needed, because I've already had situations like that where that has really saved us. So yeah, so GridPane is kind of the technical stack that sits atop that, and we use Vultr for the actual boxes for our personal stuff and for the client stuff, and it's all worked really well. Just can't say enough about it. Really like the stack from the, we'll call it like everything. What we've covered so far is everything above the actual like WordPress install, right? So let's kind of dive into that. Okay, so now we are at this point where, okay, great. So if we're walking through this journey, we have a domain name, we have DNS, we have our hosting, our box, and everything like that. Our technical stack is really solid there. What about, you're saying, Mark, we got to build something. What are we doing here? Well, a lot of different options out there, as we know, for actually building, like page building or actually constructing like sites and stuff like that in the WordPress ecosystem. We are currently using Bricks. So if you haven't used Bricks, a lot of people have. It's very popular right now. If you haven't used Bricks, though, the best way I can kind of describe it is, just again, specifically for me, is it made me feel, when I switched to Bricks, it made me feel more like an actual true like web developer, so to speak, because everything, it's taken a very, I don't know a good way to describe it, but like a very like almost HTML based approach. When you add an H1, it puts the H1, it opens the H1 tag, puts the whatever the heading is, and then closes the H1 tag. Like that's what it looks like in the actual code when you look at it. I feel like it takes you back to a much more like basic yet powerful way of interfacing with building a website. The elements, they have like pre-made elements that you can do different things with if you want. But if you really want like a true like GUI, like a graphical user interface for like building an HTML website, so to speak, that's kind of the way that I thought about it. I mean, I'm underselling it, so to speak, because there's a lot more to it. But that's just the way that I kind of think about it, and that's the feeling that it gave me. And once you understand that, especially if you came from that at all in a background before, then it's probably for you. I will counter that though, honestly, and I will say that there may be a lot of designers out there that it's not exactly like perfect for, because maybe it's just a different way of working. Not saying it's the end all be all. I'm just saying it's what I use, and we use at the agency, and I'm liking it so far. So that's what I would say about Bricks there. And also one other thing too, not to mention, is that Bricks is one of the builders that Crocoblock integrates with. So it's fantastic in that regard. We'll get to that in a second here. Next thing that we have is Happy Files. So WordPress currently in September of 2024 does not really have like a native media management system. It obviously has a media library, but doesn't have anything in there to handle that. So what Happy Files does is it gives you like a folder structure basically within your WordPress media library, and you can just create folders and you can just categorize your stuff like way better than you could have without it. So if you come over to the media library, you can kind of see here that you just have like, just give you a little live demo here, branding placeholders. Like you can do whatever you want. You have subfolders. There's other features as well, especially because Bricks and Happy Files are created by the same team. There's some integrations there. But even without Bricks, Happy Files is definitely something cool to add because you would not have this functionality elsewhere. And then you could also, again, I'm not trying to get into a tutorial on every single one of these, but you could also get into other post types and things like that and organize them the same way as you can the media. Definitely just something, again, for productivity and an organization within the backend admin of WordPress. The next one here that we have is ShortPixel. Now, I don't use ShortPixel on every single website, but I put this in here because it's a very specific thing that relates directly to what we're talking about here. If you want to have a fast website, you absolutely need to manage the file sizes of the things that you're putting on there. I've had so many times, guilty of it in the past, where like you're getting client images or you're taking images and you're putting on the website. I mean, they're like multiple megabytes that you're never going to have a fast site like that just because you're trying to load too much stuff. You're going to make sure that your images are properly sized. You're going to make sure that they're properly compressed. And then you could, leverage something like ShortPixel. They have a nice, thing on their website here where you can compress things, one-offs or even bulk things. But they have like an integration, a plugin, obviously, with WordPress. But the point is, if you're serving properly sized images that are compressed, and particularly like WebPs or next-gen formats that are not like huge like PNGs or anything like that, you're going to be pretty good, okay? A lot more to that. I'm scratching the surface there. But you need something like this. Again, there's other ones as well. We use ShortPixel from time to time. A lot of times, though, we're compressing them outside the website and then just uploading them, and it works fine. But you need something. So I wanted to put this in here because it's an extremely important point that often is overlooked, and it could be damning to your website because now your website is huge, and that's never going to load fast. Next one is, here we go, Crocoblock. I've used Crocoblock for several years now. And I discovered it when I was actually back in the Elementor, as Elementor as my main page builder. And as I said before, it integrates with Bricks now too, so that's awesome. And Crocoblock has been my go-to because, and I really appreciate everything the team has done because there's a litany of products. And obviously, if you're watching this here on the Crocoblock stream, I don't have to necessarily tell you about all this, but there is just a ton of different things here that you can utilize. And I've used pretty much every single one of these on different projects in the past. Some of them now, given the Bricks workflow, some of them like aren't necessary, but they're all incredibly powerful. The main one, because some of these obviously you don't need necessarily on every single website, depending on what you're building, right? The main one though is JetEngine, right? And a lot of times JetEngine even gets confused with Crocoblock, which is understandable. But JetEngine is what I use on. It's on the Blueprint site. You can see it right over here, right? So I love JetEngine because it it integrates with all those other tools very easily. So if I need to use it, then I can. But specifically with JetEngine I actually like how they've done a lot of different things. Obviously, they have components now and everything like that. But I love what JetEngine does specifically with post types and everything. But specifically with relations, I really like the way that the relations have done. And and again, I can show you some live demos and things like that on my website here, marksemancy.co. There's a couple of different places where I've started to relate different things to, if you're relating like one post type to another, there's a lot of added benefit there. And you can do that with other post type tools for sure. But the way that JetEngine does it, I think it's probably one of the most intuitive that I've seen specifically for like bi-directional relationships and stuff like that. So I just really appreciate the work that Crocoblock is doing and use them on every single site. So it's a core piece of our stack currently. The next one is automatic CSS. And if you're building with Bricks or other platforms as well, but if you're trying to this is where the more maintainable side of things comes in. If you're trying to build at scale, reuse things and be efficient, you need to have some sort of way to organize the stuff that you're using. If you're coming from a different page building experience, this might be a newer concept, and it was for me, it still is for me. But if you're adding CSS classes in Bricks, and you're adding different, you need some sort of a framework, I feel. I mean, again, automatic CSS has helped me. There's other options as well, but it's helped me so much. And then the fact that it integrates directly as like a sister product with the frames, where I can now bring in components and layouts and different things like that to just drop them in. It's very good for like quick prototyping of a website, or like if you're doing like if you want to speed up a client build and you just want to pop different things in there and then kind of go from there. It's just, I don't know. Again, I've built this stack specifically and curated these tools in this way. And it's just really increased my efficiency and my capability of what I can do. And it's also, I'm gonna throw this in here because I don't think I've said this yet. It's also taught me a hell of a lot. When you try different tools and you try different workflows and you expand like your go out of your comfort zone a little bit, you might be surprised what you find. I've definitely been surprised with what I've been able to do, what I've learned, and all that sort of stuff. So definitely something to consider if you are watching this and looking for other stack items and software to use, because there's a lot of different really good tools out there. Next one we use is WS Form. Now, WS Form is, I would say, in my opinion, probably one of the best, if not the best, form building plugins. I've not used every single one, but the way in which that I have been able to, this is just one of those ones where it's pretty much like everything that I could possibly think of. I've never been, there isn't really a feature that I could like think of that I haven't been able to accomplish with things in WS Form. There's just a lot of like really cool like dynamic functionality as far as like conditional logic and dynamic submissions, and then like a ton of different add-ons for different SaaS platforms as well. And I'm just, I've started using WS Form, I want to say a year or so ago, and I'm just really happy with everything that it could do. So it's definitely made my life a lot better as far as the really, again, my biggest thing, if you know me, is dynamic data. I'm absolutely crazy about like trying to make things as dynamic as possible so I can manage less things, so to speak, like less static things. And this has just really helped. I mean, you can import posts directly, like you could go through a form and put posts into the back end. I mean, there's just, I literally cannot get to all the stuff in just 25 minutes for all these tools, but that's currently what we're using there. Next one is Termageddon. So Termageddon is something that, again, I was kind of trying to go through this cycle of tools sort of like as I would in a project environment. So Termageddon comes more towards the end for us, where you are going to need something like this for your clients or for yourself if you don't want to like hire a lawyer and have like legal policies, but you do need like terms of use or terms of service, privacy policy, disclaimers, things like that. Termageddon is fantastic for that. You answer questions, it creates the policies, it always updates you on the policies. Hans and Donata and the whole team over there, they are like hawks for the new privacy laws that are coming out. We love it. So it's awesome. It makes our life easier, makes our clients happy, and I would highly recommend that. Just as a vital piece of our stack, and it's awesome. So rank math, again, slightly outside the scope of like the dynamic and fastness of a stack here, but rank math is another important one that we have to have for SEO. We just have the free version normally because it gets the job done for us, but it is great because there's a ton of different things you can do, specifically like built-in redirections and all that sort of stuff, and obviously takes care of all the main SEO things. But you got to have that because it doesn't matter if your site is fast or not. You're going to make sure that it's ranking or that people can find it. So that's an important piece there. Now, this last one is probably the most critical for what we're talking about here today, dynamic fast sites. Now, the thing is, what I have, if we take and we stop right here and we look back at the whole way that we got here, honestly, if you are building responsibly, if you're making sure you're using like small, like WebP, like images, if you're not doing crazy like video embeds, right? Like, again, I do a lot of video. if you're careful with the video embedding and things like that, and all of those like, more technical, performance-based, tasks when you're building, you actually might not need, with the stack, I'm just telling you from personal experience, there's actually times where I don't need a performance plugin like Perf Matters, okay? However, if you do have a situation like that, if you do have, like videos that are kind of bogging it down, like YouTube embeds or stuff like that, or, you just do have like a website, it has a lot of mass to it, right? Like a lot of images or just heavy on video or something like that. Perf Matters is definitely something that has helped us tremendously. We've used Perf Matters. on several sites at this point, and every single time it's just like, it is kind of like there's a ton of settings, but it's more or less like you enable it, and then there's a lot of like defaults, and you can kind of go through and check some things off. But just a lot of different things on the back end. Again, I can't get to all of it right now, but it is the one that has helped us the most with just given again the stack that we have here when we need it. So yeah, I would say this is kind of like the next the secret weapon, so to speak. If you get to this point and you're like, my speed, I built really well, I followed all like pretty good best practices, but it's not really where I want it. Maybe I need perf matters to take us over the edge and get us to the finish line there. That's probably what I would recommend. But with all that being said, guys, I hope that you learned a little bit of something here, at least got some insights onto the different tooling and the way that we build websites. If you're interested in any of this stuff, if you head over to markszymanski.co/tools, you can see everything that we've mentioned here and way more. This is all the tools that I've personally used in my agency and personal career here. A lot of information here, a lot of stuff if you want to check it out. And the other thing too that I'll mention while we're here is that if you want to play around with this website, this is kind of going to give you an idea of what that stack can do, at least from us building it, so to speak, because this was built with that same stack that we just talked about a month ago. So it'll give you kind of a little bit of an idea as far as a real world example of what we just talked about. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, or you just want to reach out, if you head over to mjs.bio, you can see all my links over there and check it all out. To Crocoblock, thank you so much for having me. I greatly appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys later.